March 15th, 1944. Over the skies of Brunswick, Germany, Captain James Red Holt jerks his Thunderbolt left, the straps biting into his shoulders. The engine growls under full power. The whole airframe vibrates like it's ready to tear apart. He scans the void, nothing but fog and flickering sunlight. Below, 800 B-17 bombers drag their shadows across the clouds, each one stuffed with 10 young men and enough explosives to erase a city block. Holt watches from above, protector, witness, survivor. He already knows how this story usually ends. Since January, the 8th Air Force has lost 284 bombers, 2,200 men who will never touch the ground again. The Luftwaffe has changed the rules. They don't fight the escorts anymore. They wait for the crippled, the limping, smoking stragglers that fall behind the formation. Easy meat? Holt has seen it. Yesterday, 6 Focke-Wulfs found a wounded B-17 nicknamed Memphis Belle II. Stragglers, Sector Charlie 2, the radio crackled. Holt dove throttle to the wall, but he was still a mile out when tracers slashed across the bomber's tail. 43 seconds later, the sky caught fire. 10 men vanished. The only thing left was smoke and static. Holt slammed his fist on the console. "We can't even reach them in time," he muttered through his mask. His wingman said nothing. There was nothing to say. Because this isn't a battle anymore. It's a hunt. The enemy doesn't duel. They stalk. They circle beyond radar range, watching for the telltale signs: a feathered prop, leaking oil, a drifting formation. When they see it, they strike fast and disappear. Fighter escorts like Holt can't be everywhere. By the time they see the smoke, the bomber is already dying. Every debrief sounds the same. We lost the wounded first. Command rooms fill with shouting. Charts, losses, new orders, nothing works. Major General William Kepner pounds his desk. "Gentlemen, tactics won't save us. The enemy has turned our wounded into bait." He's right. Engineers promise thicker armor. Strategists design tighter formations. But every mission ends the same: another crippled bomber, another empty bunk. And fear spreads faster than fire. Pilots begin seeing bullet holes that aren't there. Mechanics wash soot from planes that never took hits. In the mess halls, the jokes get darker. "If you get hit," one gunner says, "don't call for help. You'll just get everyone killed." Even the bravest start glancing at their instruments for ghosts, oil pressure dropping, altimeter twitching phantom signs of death. Holt feels it too. Each mission blurs into another: sky, flak, smoke, grief. At night he writes names on a scrap of paper, friends he won't see at breakfast. By March, the list is longer than the missions he's flown. Somewhere, deep inside, he knows the truth. We're not protecting the right planes. Outside, the airfield sleeps under fog. Trucks idle, generators hum, spotlights slice through mist. The smell of burnt aviation fuel hangs over everything. In the officers' club, the whiskey is cheap, and the silence is heavy. Holt sits at the bar, staring at the smoke curling off his glass. Around him, laughter sounds hollow, men laughing because the alternative is screaming. Across the room, a young crew chief, a man with paint under his nails, sketches absently on a napkin. A thunderbolt. Bullet holes drawn too perfectly. A trail of smoke that looks just a bit too even. He stares at the drawing for a long time, then whispers something under his breath. "What if we make them think we're the wounded?" Holt doesn't hear him. No one does. Not yet. In 4 hours, that man, an artist, not a soldier, will walk into this same bar with an idea that sounds impossible. An idea that will violate doctrine, enrage the lawyers, and save hundreds of lives. An idea built from paint, smoke, and deception. It will flip the predator's instinct against itself. It will make the Luftwaffe doubt their own eyes. And it will prove that sometimes the strongest weapon in war is the illusion of weakness. The Luftwaffe didn't invent genius. They simply perfected cruelty. While the Allies poured steel and sweat into bigger engines and thicker armor, one German ace wrote a single sentence that changed everything. A healthy bomber fights, a crippled bomber runs. His name was Hans Joseph Pips Priller, a 22-kill veteran who understood psychology better than any manual. In December 1943, he circulated a paper across Jagdgeschwader 26, the most feared fighter group on the Western Front. The memo was blunt. We do not waste fuel or ammunition on strong prey. We hunt the wounded. That sentence became doctrine. Within weeks, formations of German fighters began orbiting bomber routes at a distance, invisible, patient, waiting. They called it the Wolfpack. At first, Allied intelligence didn't understand the pattern. Why were attacks coming from empty quadrants of sky? Why were bombers hit after the escort had passed? Then, the reports started matching. Over Brunswick, over Bremen, over Hanover. Always the same story, a crippled B-17 trailing smoke, radio silent, limping west, and then the wolves descended. One pilot described it in his debrief. It's like being stalked by ghosts. You can feel them before you see them. The results were devastating. In January 1944 alone, 73% of all bombers lost were stragglers, aircraft separated from formation by battle damage or mechanical failure. The Luftwaffe had discovered a mathematical truth of war. Speed plus patience equals control. They didn't have to destroy the formation. They only had to break it apart. And once the herd was scattered, the hunt was easy. American fighter groups tried to adapt. They created Guardian flights, pairs of escorts assigned to shadow-damaged bombers all the way home. It worked for a week. Then the Germans waited until the Guardians hit fuel limit and turned back. 2 minutes later, the straggler was dead. Command tried longer-range patrols, but the sky was too wide, the fuel too short, the tactics too late. They tried new radio codes for crippled bombers to call for help. The Luftwaffe simply jammed the frequencies. One by one, every countermeasure failed. On February 28th, Major General William Kepner gathered the senior staff of the 8th Fighter Command. The transcript reads like a confession. "Gentlemen, we are defending the healthy and abandoning the hurt. The enemy has turned our wounded into lures." No one argued. Around the table, veterans stared at the map, red pins for raids, black pins for losses, and realized they were losing a game they didn't know they were playing. There was talk of banning rescue attempts altogether. Let the damaged fall alone to save fuel and fighters. The suggestion reached General Eisenhower's desk. He wrote one word across it in red pencil: never. Noble, but useless. By mid-March, the fear inside bomber crews had changed shape. It wasn't just the flak or the fighters, it was the idea of being damaged. A clean kill was almost merciful. A crippled aircraft meant 30 minutes of slow panic watching oil pressure drop, seeing your friends try to reach you, knowing they'll die trying. Pilots began reporting illusions, sparks that weren't there, smoke trails that vanished when others looked. Crews aborted missions claiming engine trouble that ground teams could never find. The psychological toll was measurable. Missions were still launching, but courage was cracking. Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Dickman of the 359th Fighter Squadron threw his cap across the briefing room after losing 3 escorts in a single rescue. "They're using our compassion against us," he shouted. "We see a cripple, we dive to help, and suddenly we're outnumbered 4-1. They've turned mercy into a trap." The men in that room understood. The enemy wasn't just beating them with planes, they were beating them with perception. And perception spreads like smoke. Every crew that watched a straggler burn carried the fear home. Every mechanic who patched bullet holes knew another set was coming tomorrow. The war had become a loop of exhaustion. Reports reached Washington filled with phrases like chronic morale deterioration and combat fatigue escalation. No new fighter design could fix that. Because the real weapon wasn't a Messerschmitt or a cannon shell. The real weapon was belief. The Germans had taught the Americans to believe that damage equals death. And once you believe that, you start losing before the fight even begins. Across the English Channel, in a hangar reeking of oil and cold metal, a young maintenance sergeant studies bullet holes on a returning aircraft. He runs his fingers along the aluminum skin, tracing the black soot. He doesn't know it yet, but he's about to ask a question no one else has dared to ask. What if damage could lie? 4 hours later, that question will become a sketch, and that sketch will become a weapon. The man who would change the air war didn't fly. He painted. Technical Sergeant Daniel Weiss, age 24, crew chief for the 359th Fighter Squadron. He'd come from Brooklyn, son of a butcher and a dreamer. In another life, he designed advertisements for cold cream and cigarettes. His specialty was making ordinary things look extraordinary. Now he painted kill marks on Thunderbolts and patched bullet holes with his own hands. He wasn't supposed to have ideas. His job was grease, not strategy. But after months of seeing aircraft crawl home riddled with holes, something inside him snapped. He started noticing patterns: how shrapnel walked across aluminum, how smoke clung to oil, how fatal looked different from fixable. To Weiss, battle damage was art. It had a texture, a composition. And one night in March 1944, in the officers' club, he saw that pattern come alive on paper. Holt sat at the bar, 3 drinks deep, talking to anyone who would listen about the B-17 he couldn't save. "They can smell a wounded plane from miles away," he said. "They wait for weakness." Weiss half listened, scribbling on a napkin. His pencil moved without thought, drawing a thunderbolt, then trailing smoke, then bullet holes. Too symmetrical, too clean, a caricature of damage. He stared at it for a long moment. "What if we make them think they have the advantage?" he murmured. Holt looked up. "Say again?" Weiss pushed the napkin across the table. "You fly an escort that looks shot to hell. Make it limp. Make it bleed smoke. Let them come to kill it, and that's when you spring the trap." Holt blinked. "That's camouflage in reverse." "Exactly," Weiss said. "Theater tricks. Makeup. Deception." Holt laughed once. "Sergeant, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard." Weiss smiled. "Maybe, but so is dying the same way every day." Silence. Then Holt's expression shifted, from mockery to curiosity. The next morning, Weiss was summoned to brief Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Dickman. The room was full of officers in pressed uniforms, and one mechanic with paint-stained hands. He laid the napkin on the table. "Sir, if the enemy hunts the wounded, let's give them wounded prey that bites back." Dickman stared at the sketch, then at the sergeant. "You're asking me to turn my fighters into bait?" "No, sir. Into actors." Another silence. Then Dickman said 6 words that would change everything. "Show me. You have 48 hours." Weiss gathered a motley crew from the hangars. Corporal Tommy Chen, a former Disney animator, Private Marcus Wright, a stage makeup artist from Harlem, and Staff Sergeant Irene Kowalski, a mechanic from Detroit who could bend metal like it was cardboard. 3 days ago, they were fixing hydraulics. Now they were about to build an illusion. The hangar became a theater. They needed damage that looked real from 500 yards but could vanish up close. Chen suggested cellulose acetate, thin, clear plastic used for animation frames heated and warped to mimic torn aluminum. Paint it with soot, clip it on the fuselage with quick-release latches. From a distance, authentic. In flight, harmless. Next, smoke. Real engine fire was black and chaotic. They needed control. Weiss tore apart a captured German smoke system and rebuilt it under the belly of a P-47, a canister that could release white or black vapor on command from the cockpit. The effect was perfect, too perfect. It fooled everyone watching from the runway. Finally, performance. "A damaged plane doesn't just look different," Weiss told Holt. "It moves different." They wrote a checklist for acting. Throttle down 40%. Drop altitude gradually. Fly slightly off trim. Feather a prop every few minutes. From a distance, it looked crippled. Up close, it was a predator pretending to bleed. On March 17th, 3 modified Thunderbolts rolled out for demonstration. Dickman walked around them slowly, gloved hand brushing the fake bullet holes. Smoke trailed from the cowling, exactly wrong enough to look right. He circled once more, then stopped. "This violates the laws of war," he said quietly. "False signals of distress are prohibited under Hague Article 23. Weiss swallowed. "Sir, we're not flying false flags. We're still American fighters, just uglier." Holt stepped forward. "Sir, they turned our bombers into bait. We're just returning the favor." Dickman looked at the two men for a long time. Then he turned to his operations officer. How long to train a full squadron on these maneuvers? 48 hours. Do it. But no one outside this hangar hears a word. If it works, we expand. If it fails, he looked at Weiss. You'll spend the rest of the war painting latrines. Weiss nodded. Understood. Outside, rain began to fall on the tin roof, a slow, metallic drumbeat that matched his heart. He had 2 days to turn art into strategy, and if he was wrong, men would die because of his idea. In the corner of the hangar, the 3 Thunderbolts sat silent under flickering lamps. Smoke curled faintly from one cowling as a test line ran. For the first time since the war began, the Americans weren't waiting for the enemy to move. They were painting a trap. And it looked like a wound. March 18th, 1944. The hangar smells of paint, oil, and adrenaline. 3 Thunderbolts sit lined up like performers waiting for curtain call, smoke canisters loaded, false panels glinting under the lights. Daniel Weiss hasn't slept in 30 hours. He paces between aircraft, checklist in hand, eyes bloodshot. You really think this will fool them? Holt asks, arms crossed. Weiss shrugs. If we've done our job right, it won't just fool them, it'll insult them. They both laugh, the kind of laugh that sounds like fear. Outside, a convoy of staff cars crunches across the gravel. The audience has arrived. Major General William Kepner, commander of 8th Fighter Command, steps out first, flanked by legal officers, intelligence staff, and a half-dozen skeptical colonels. They file into the hangar like priests entering a courtroom. Kepner's voice carries. All right, Sergeant Weiss. Let's see this miracle of yours. Weiss gestures to the first P-47. Sir, this is a standard Thunderbolt, modified with detachable false damage panels and controlled smoke emission. He taps the fuselage, the dull, hollow sound of cellulose acetate. At 500 yards, you can't tell it's fake. He signals. Holt flicks a switch. White smoke billows from the cowling. The illusion is perfect, chaotic, desperate, wrong in all the right ways. The officers murmur. One of them, a lawyer from the judge advocate's office, folds his arms. Sergeant, what you're proposing constitutes perfidy, false distress signals. Article 23 of the Hague Convention explicitly forbids deception that lures an enemy under false pretenses. Weiss keeps his tone level. Sir, we're not flying false colors or faking surrender. We're camouflaging performance. Camouflage makes you harder to see, the lawyer snaps. This makes you a liar. The room erupts, voices overlapping, uniforms bristling. Some support him. If it saves lives, let's try it. Others hiss. We're not Nazis. We don't trick our enemies. Kepner lets it go for a full minute, the sound of a military wrestling with its own soul. Then he raises a hand. Silence. Gentlemen, he says, when the Germans decided to target our damaged aircraft, did they violate any convention? The lawyer hesitates. Technically, no, sir. Unsportsmanlike, but not illegal. Then, when we disguise our aircraft as damaged, we're responding in kind through camouflage, not perfidy. Another pause. The difference, Kepner continues, is that it makes them uncomfortable instead of us. He looks at Holt. Captain, you've flown the prototype. Can you still fight effectively? Yes, sir, Holt says without hesitation. Full combat capability. We just look like we're losing. And can you maintain the illusion? Long enough to make them believe. Across the hangar, Colonel Dickman watches in silence. This is his squadron, his risk, his men. Finally, he speaks. Sir, we've spent the past year reacting to German tactics. For once, we're ahead of them. I recommend limited trial, 1 flight, controlled engagement. Kepner studies the faces around him, the believers, the doubters, the frightened. Fine, he says at last. 3 missions. If casualties exceed normal, we abort. If results don't justify the risk, we bury it. He turns to Weiss. But if this works, Sergeant, every fighter group in 8th Air Force will learn your trick within 30 days. Weiss's hands shake slightly. Understood, sir. Then carry on, Kepner says. The officers disperse. murmuring, half scandalized, half intrigued. As the last engine fades into the distance, Holt claps Weiss on the shoulder. "You realize what you just did?" Weiss exhales. "Invented a war crime?" Holt grins. "Maybe. Or maybe we just invented survival." That night, the hangar becomes a different kind of battlefield. The crew works through darkness, welding lamps flicker, compressors hiss, rain tapping the roof in steady rhythm. On one wall, a chalkboard reads, "Operation Ghost Skin." Weiss sketches final notes beside it: angle of smoke emission, frequency of prop feathering, delay timing for ambush call. Holt rehearses maneuvers in the cockpit, throttling down, stalling slightly, regaining speed over and over until it becomes muscle memory. "How long can you act crippled before they realize?" Weiss asks. "Long enough," Holt replies. At 2, the generator cuts out. The hangar plunges into darkness. For a moment, only the rain remains. Weiss sits on an overturned crate, staring at his hands streaked with grease and silver paint. Somewhere above him, he can hear B-17 seconds droning home through the fog, engines coughing. He whispers to himself, "Make the strong look weak." On March 20th, the test day arrives. 3 Thunderbolts, marked and smoking, taxi onto the runway under a pale sunrise. Holt leads, canopy open, a grin cutting through exhaustion. "Ready to fool the world?" Weiss calls over the roar. Holt nods. "Let's make them chase ghosts." The engines thunder, wheels lift, smoke blooms. To anyone watching from the ground, it looks like 3 dying aircraft struggling into the sky. But this time, the wounded are armed, and they're hunting back. March 22nd, 1944. Mission 250 target, the ball-bearing factories at Schweinfurt. 12 Thunderbolts rise into the pale German sky. 4 of them aren't what they seem. Captain James "Red" Holt leads the decoy flight. His P-47 looks crippled before it even leaves the ground. Fake bullet holes along the fuselage, a smoking cowling, one prop feathered. From a distance, it's a dying bird. Up close, it's a trap with 2,500 horsepower. Holt throttles back to 180 miles per hour, dangerously slow. The bomber stream hums far ahead, a moving wall of silver. His squadron's real mission isn't escorting anymore. It's acting. Above him, 8 Thunderbolts orbit at 15,000 feet, the hunters. Every man knows the plan. Let the enemy think the bait is real. Holt activates the smoke generator. White vapor trails from his cowling, curling through the morning air. "Looks good." Weiss's voice crackles through the radio from the ground. "You look like hell, Captain." Holt smirks. "That's the point." At 13:47 hours, 200 miles east, German radar operators catch the signal. Damaged American fighter, altitude 18,000, falling behind formation. The report reaches Jagdgeschwader 1, commanded by Ace Heinz Bear, 179 kills to his name. He doesn't hesitate. Scramble 6. 6 Messerschmitts lift off from Osnabrück, sunlight glinting off their canopies. They spot the smoking Thunderbolt from 8 miles away. Single crippled American. Easy kill. Bear radios. The hunt begins. Holt can feel them before he sees them, a pressure in the air, like a storm moving closer. "They're coming," his wingman whispers. "Stay in character," Holt replies. The temptation to run burns through every muscle, but he holds the throttle steady, the smoke thickening behind him. The Messerschmitts dive from the sun. Formation perfect. 12,000 feet. 8,000. 5,000. Holt keeps descending slowly, pretending to struggle. At 400 yards, Bear lines up his shot. The German ace smiles. "This one's mine." Then the sky explodes. 8 Thunderbolts drop from above like hawks breaking cover, guns blazing. Tracers carve white lines through the clouds. Holt slams his throttle forward. The fake smoke cuts off. His prop spins to full speed. In 1 second, the crippled bird becomes a predator. "Now!" Fisher shouts over the radio. The hunters dive. The Germans never see it coming. Bear jerks hard right, tracers slicing past his canopy. One bursts through his left wing, shredding the aileron. He yells something, then static. His Messerschmitt tumbles, spiraling down. One of his wingmen tries to climb, but Holt's burst rips across the fuselage. The fighter disintegrates in midair. 90 seconds of chaos. Then, silence. 4 German fighters destroyed. 1 crippled. 2 escaped. American losses, 0. Not a single bullet hole. On the ground, Weiss watches the gun camera footage, frame by frame. He sees smoke, deception, and then revelation. A crippled plane that wasn't crippled. An ambush in open sky. It worked, he whispers. God, it actually worked. Intelligence officers crowd behind him, stunned. They've never seen an engagement like it. The Germans had walked into a painting one Weiss himself designed. Within 48 hours, Luftwaffe intelligence issues a memo. American fighters may be employing deception tactics. Aircraft showing damage may be fully operational. Approach with caution. But the warning comes too late. March 24th, 3 more decoy missions over Bremen. 6 German fighters destroyed. American losses, 1 Thunderbolt. Minor damage. March 27th, 2 missions over Mannheim. 8 German fighters destroyed. No losses. March 29th, coordinated strike. 6 squadrons now trained in decoy operations. 17 enemy aircraft downed in 1 day. American bomber losses hit a 3-month low. The numbers are staggering. Before the decoy program, bomber survival rate, 27%. After 73%. In 30 days, the 359th Fighter Squadron claims 40 confirmed kills. It usually takes 6 months to hit that number. But the statistics only tell half the story. Something deeper happens in the enemy's mind. Captured Luftwaffe pilot Klaus Hartmann tells interrogators, "We cannot trust our eyes anymore. What looks weak may be strong. What looks wounded may be a trap." Fear changes sides. The Wolfpack doctrine collapses. German pilots begin hesitating, circling, second-guessing. And in air combat, hesitation is death. For Weiss, the victory feels surreal. He watches the reports roll in, every mission confirming the same truth. Paint and psychology just outperformed armor and firepower. But he also knows what the paperwork won't say, that every success started with a lie. He walks the flight line at dusk, staring at the smoke-streaked planes. The crews laugh now, lighter, louder. They believe again. Holt waves from the cockpit. "You still think it's dumb, Sergeant?" Weiss smiles. "Dumber than ever." "Good," Holt says. "Then let's keep doing it." The sun dips below the horizon. Engines roar. Shadows lengthen. And for the first time in months, the hunters aren't the Germans. They're the men who learned how to lie. By April 15th, 1944, less than a month after Weiss's idea left the napkin, every fighter group in 8th Air Force had at least 1 squadron trained in decoy operations. The tactic spread like wildfire. It crossed the Channel to the RAF, then south to the Mediterranean. Maintenance crews became illusionists, specialists in soot and symmetry, repainting fake damage between missions like stage performers resetting props. The effect on morale was immediate. Bomber crews who once flinched at the sound of flak now watched wounded aircraft limp home under the protection of Thunderbolts that only pretended to bleed. The Germans never truly recovered. Their Wolfpack doctrine, once the terror of the skies, collapsed under its own paranoia. Because now, every smoking aircraft could be a lie. Every easy target might be bait. And in war, when you start doubting what you see, you start dying in ways you can't predict. Between March 22nd, 1944, and VE Day, in May 1945, decoy-equipped squadrons recorded 247 confirmed kills, the highest kill ratio of any tactical innovation in the European theater. 890 bomber crewmen survived missions they statistically should have died on. Historians would later call it psychological air superiority. But to the men who lived it, it was simpler. It was revenge through imagination. Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Dickman, who had authorized the first trial, retired as a brigadier general in 1963. In his private notes, he wrote, "We spent years building better armor, better guns, better engines. A sergeant with a paintbrush beat all of them with perception. Holt, the man who flew the first decoy mission, would survive 47 more. He ended the war with 12 confirmed kills and a Distinguished Flying Cross. Decades later, standing under the glass roof of the Air Force Museum, he told a crowd, "People ask if I was scared, flying as bait. Brother, every mission was scary. But this one I had control. I wasn't hoping the Germans missed me. I was making sure they saw me." There's power in that. Even the legend of Hub Zemke, the ace who first pushed to expand the experiment, found a new chapter. He called the program the most brilliant use of psychology I ever saw in combat. For him, it was proof that ingenuity, not machinery, wins wars. And Daniel Weiss, the quiet sergeant from Brooklyn, never sought glory. He refused officer promotion 3 times. He requested transfer back to maintenance duty after the trials ended. When the war was over, he returned to advertising. For decades, no one knew his story. His commendation was classified under the phrase advanced camouflage development. Only in 1989, when a historian tracked him down, did Weiss speak publicly for the first and only time. He sat in a small studio in Queens, gray hair, thick glasses, paint still on his fingernails. "I didn't change the war," he said. "I just solved a visual problem. The Germans were looking for wounded aircraft, so we showed them wounded aircraft." He laughed softly. "That's not genius, that's advertising." The interviewer asked if he was proud. Weiss paused for a long time. "I'm proud we saved lives," he said finally. "I'm not proud it was necessary." In a file box donated to the Air Force Archives after his death, one letter stood out. It was dated June 1945. Written in blue ink, signed by Lieutenant Robert McIntyre, B-17 pilot, 381st Bombardment Group. "Dear Sergeant Weiss, you don't know me. I don't know you. But on April 7th, 1944, my bomber took flak over Magdeburg. We lost 2 engines and fell behind formation. We called for help, expecting none. Then 3 P-47 seconds appeared, painted to look as broken as we were. The Germans came. Your fighters were waiting. They shot down 4 before the rest ran. All 10 of us made it home, because of paint, because of deception, because someone thought differently about camouflage. I'm getting married next month to a girl from Baltimore. We'll have kids. They'll have kids. All because of that idea. You saved more than lives, Sergeant. You saved futures. Thank you." That letter was found folded inside Weiss's flight manual. The creases were worn from years of reading. After the war, militaries across the world studied Operation Ghost Skin. The Israeli Air Force adapted similar deception tactics in 1973. The U.S. Navy used decoy ship profiles in the Gulf War. Modern cyber warfare textbooks still cite the Weiss protocol as a model for asymmetric response. Use perception to control initiative. Make the enemy waste his strength on ghosts. Yet the heart of the story isn't the tactic. It's the lesson behind it. Daniel Weiss never fired a gun, never dropped a bomb. He changed warfare with an idea. An idea born not from aggression, but empathy, the pain of watching too many pilots die. Innovation in war rarely comes from the men trained to innovate. It comes from outsiders, from people who don't know what can't be done. Weiss looked at air combat and saw a visual problem, not a tactical one. To him, the enemy's strength wasn't firepower, it was belief. And he broke that belief with a lie so elegant, it became truth. The strongest position isn't always looking strong. Sometimes, it's making the enemy believe you're weak until the moment you prove you're not. Pause, ambient wind, faint propeller hum. They say war is chaos. But chaos can be shaped by minds brave enough to see differently. On that cold March morning in 1944, a young artist turned deception into salvation. He didn't just change tactics, he changed how men thought about truth, perception, and survival. 40 German fighters fell for painted wounds. Thousands of airmen lived to see home. All because someone drew smoke on a napkin. The most dangerous enemy is the one you underestimate. The most powerful weapon is the human imagination.